Imagine waking up one morning to find out that something from another star system just broke every rule we thought we knew about physics. And right now, at this very moment, scientists around the world are scrambling to understand what they are witnessing, because what started as a routine observation of an interstellar visitor has turned into something that nobody can explain. Before we dive into video, please subscribe our channel. You see, there is an object out there in space called 3I Atlas, and when I tell you what it just did, you are going to understand why the greatest minds in physics, including the legendary Michio, Kaku, are calling this one of the most significant and terrifying discoveries in the history of astronomy. But before we get into what happened, we need to go back to where this story really begins, because to understand why scientists are panicking, you first need to know what makes this object so special and why it was never supposed to do what it just did. For most of human history, we believed that everything in our solar system belonged to our sun, that comets, asteroids, and planets were all part of our cosmic family orbiting our star in predictable patterns that we could calculate and understand. But then everything changed. In 2017, astronomers detected something that should not have been there. A cigar-shaped object moving through our solar system at incredible speed. And here is the thing, it was not orbiting our sun. It was passing through our solar system like a highway cutting across space in a path that could only mean one thing. It came from another star system. They named it Oumuamua, which means scout in Hawaiian. And for the first time in recorded history, we had confirmed that objects from other star systems could visit our cosmic neighborhood. This was not just exciting, it was revolutionary, because it meant that interstellar space was not empty, that things were traveling between the stars, and we had finally spotted one. Then, in 2019, it happened again. Another visitor from beyond our solar system arrived, and this one was different. It was clearly a comet with a visible tail streaming behind it as it heated up, passing closer to our sun. They called it Borisov, and amateur astronomer Gennady Borisov discovered it using a telescope he built himself. Now, astronomers knew that interstellar visitors were not just possible, they were actually happening. And if two had been detected in just a couple of years, that meant there were probably many more out there that we had simply missed, because space is vast and these objects are incredibly hard to spot. This brings us to 3I Atlas, the third confirmed interstellar object, and this is where things start to get really strange, because while Oumuamua and Borisov were mysterious in their own ways, they still mostly followed the rules of physics. As we understand them, 3I Atlas was first detected by the Atlas Survey System, which stands for Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System, a network of telescopes designed to scan the sky, looking for potentially dangerous objects that might threaten Earth. And when they spotted this object, the computers immediately flagged it as unusual. At first, astronomers thought it might be another comet, or perhaps an asteroid from the outer reaches of our own solar system. These things happen all the time, and usually they turn out to be routine observations. But as they tracked 3I Atlas over the following nights, they realized something was very wrong. The trajectory was all wrong. The speed was all wrong. And when they calculated backward to figure out where it came from, the computers kept giving them the same impossible answer. This object had come from interstellar space, and it was moving in a way that made no sense. Dr. Michio Kaku, one of the most respected theoretical physicists in the world, was brought in to consult on the data, and what he saw made him go pale, because the object was not just moving through space, it was accelerating, and not in the way comets normally accelerate when they get close to the sun. You see, when comets approach the sun, they heat up and ice on their surface turns to gas, creating jets. That can push the comet slightly, altering its path. This is called outgassing. And it is completely normal. We have seen it thousands of times with comets in our own solar system. And this is what seemed to explain Oumuamua's strange acceleration even. Though Oumuamua did not look like a typical comet, but 3I Atlas was doing something completely different. It was accelerating in a direction that could not be explained by outgassing. It was accelerating against the direction it should have been pushed, and the amount of acceleration was far greater than any natural process we know of could produce. Think about that for a moment. An object from another star system traveling through our cosmic neighborhood is speeding up in ways that violate our understanding of how these things work. and the acceleration was not random, it appeared to be controlled. The initial data was checked and rechecked by teams around the world, everyone looking for an error in the calculations or a mistake in the observations, because what the data was suggesting was so extraordinary that it seemed impossible. But every analysis came back with the same result: the acceleration was real. Now here is where things get even more bizarre, as astronomers continued to track 3I Atlas. They noticed that the object was also changing brightness in a regular pattern, pulsing like a heartbeat every few hours. The object would brighten and then dim in a cycle that was too regular to be random. Michio Kaku held an emergency press conference, and his words sent shockwaves through the scientific community and the public when he said that we are looking at something that might not be entirely natural, that the possibility we are dealing with technology from another civilization cannot be ruled out. Imagine hearing those words from one of the world's leading physicists, not from a science fiction writer, not from a conspiracy theorist, but from a man who has spent his entire life studying the fundamental laws of the universe, telling us that we might be looking at alien technology. The media went into a frenzy overnight. 3I Atlas became the most talked about object in space. Everyone wanted to know what it was, where it came from, and most importantly, what it was doing in our solar system. But scientists urged caution, reminding everyone that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Teams of astronomers immediately began studying the object with every telescope they could point at it. Radio telescopes were aimed at 3I Atlas, listening for any signals, any transmissions. Any hint of communication. Infrared telescopes examined its heat signature. Optical telescopes tracked its every movement. And this is when things went from strange to absolutely terrifying, because 3I Atlas did something that nobody saw coming, something that made even the most skeptical scientists start to wonder if we were really alone in the universe. As dozens of telescopes around the world watched, 3I Atlas suddenly changed course. Not gradually the way a comet might alter its path due to outgassing, but sharply, decisively, like a spacecraft executing a maneuver, and the new trajectory was taking it on a path that would bring it closer to Earth. Let me be clear about what this means. Objects in space do not just change course. Asteroids and comets follow predictable orbits governed by gravity and momentum. Yes, they can be affected by the gravity of planets or the sun. Yes, outgassing can nudge them slightly, but sudden, sharp course corrections. This is the signature of propulsion. The panic that followed was unprecedented. Space agencies around the world went into crisis mode. NASA convened emergency meetings. The European Space Agency mobilized their best scientists. Even countries that rarely cooperate on space research began sharing data, because everyone understood that this was bigger than national interests. Michio Kaku appeared on every major news network, and his message was consistent. We need to prepare for the possibility that we are witnessing first contact with an extraterrestrial intelligence, but we also need to remain calm and scientific in our approach. We cannot let fear override reason. But fear was spreading because 3I Atlas was now on a trajectory that would bring it within the orbit of the moon. And if it continued to maneuver, if it continued to show signs of intelligent control, then every assumption we had ever made about our place in the universe would have to be reconsidered. Governments around the world faced an impossible dilemma. Do they tell the public everything and risk mass panic, or do they withhold information and risk being accused of a cover-up in the end? Most chose a middle path, releasing carefully worded statements, acknowledging the unusual nature of 3I Atlas while downplaying the more alarming possibilities. Meanwhile, astronomers were making more discoveries about the object. Spectroscopic analysis, which involves studying the light reflected or emitted by an object, showed that 3I Atlas was made of materials that were not quite like anything we had seen before. The ratios of elements were off. There was too much of some things and not enough of others. It was close enough to natural that it could be explained as just an unusual composition from another star system, but different enough that it raised more questions. Then the radio telescopes picked up something that made everyone stop and listen. A faint signal coming from the direction of 3I Atlas. It was not random noise. It had structure, repetition patterns that seemed almost like they could be meaningful. The signal was weak, so weak that at first many thought it might be interference from Earth-based sources, satellites, power lines, any of the thousands of things that can create false positives in radio astronomy. But as the analysis continued, it became clear that the signal was really coming from 3I Atlas. Now you have to understand what this means for scientists who spend their careers searching for signs of extraterrestrial intelligence. This was the moment they had dreamed of and dreaded. A genuine, unexplained signal from an object that was already behaving in ways that suggested it might not be natural. The SETI Institute, the organization dedicated to searching for extraterrestrial intelligence, deployed every resource they had, trying to decode the signal, trying to understand if it was truly a message or just some natural phenomenon we did not yet understand. Dr. Kaku cautioned that even if the signal was real, and even if it was coming from 3I Atlas, it might not be a message directed at us. It could be leakage from onboard systems, like how our satellites and spacecraft emit radiation as a byproduct of their operation, or it could be something we could not even imagine yet. But here is what kept scientists up. At night, the signal seemed to change slightly. Every time 3I Atlas performed one of its maneuvers, almost like a telemetry readout, like the object was reporting its status to someone or something. As 3I Atlas drew closer to Earth, the tension became unbearable. Every day brought new observations, and every observation brought new mysteries. The object was now close enough that our best telescopes could make out its shape, and what they saw was deeply unsettling. 3I Atlas was not a simple rock or a dirty snowball like most comets. It had geometry angles and flat surfaces that seemed too regular, too precise to be entirely natural. It was elongated with what appeared to be distinct sections, almost like a segmented structure. Some scientists argued that these features could still be natural, that we had seen strangely shaped asteroids before. Remember, Oumuamua was cigar-shaped, and that was almost certainly natural, but others pointed out that the proportions of 3I Atlas were different, more regular, more symmetrical. Then came the observation that changed everything. A team using the Hubble Space Telescope captured an image that showed what appeared to be an opening on the surface of 3I Atlas, a dark, oval shape that seemed to be a hole or a hatch, and even more incredibly, in subsequent images, taken hours later, the opening appeared to have closed. Now the scientific community was truly divided. Half argued that we were seeing natural processes, perhaps a crater seen from different angles, as the object rotated, or shadows cast by irregular terrain. But the other half could not shake the feeling that they were looking at something artificial. Michio Kaku went on record, saying that we have now crossed a threshold where the hypothesis that 3I Atlas is an artificial object must be seriously considered, not as science fiction, not as wild speculation, but as a legitimate scientific possibility that demands investigation. Space agencies began making plans for a close approach mission. If 3I Atlas continued on its current path, it would pass near Earth in approximately 6 months. That was barely enough time to prepare and launch a probe, but it might be our only chance to get a close look at this mysterious visitor. The engineering challenges were immense, launching a spacecraft matching velocity with an interstellar object and getting close enough to send back detailed images, all within a 6-month window. But the alternative was to let 3I Atlas pass by and possibly leave our solar system forever, taking its secrets with it, as preparations began for what was being called the most important space mission in human history. 3. Atlas provided another shock that made everyone wonder if we were already too late. The object suddenly went dark. The regular pulsing brightness that astronomers had been tracking simply stopped. 3I Atlas was still there. Radar could still detect it, but it had stopped reflecting light, as if it had somehow cloaked itself, or shut down whatever was causing the brightness variations. For 3 days there was nothing, no signal, no brightness changes, no maneuvers. 3. Atlas just coasted silently through space, and the silence was more frightening than any of the strange behavior that had come before, because it suggested awareness. It suggested that whatever 3I Atlas was, it knew it was being watched. Then, on the 4th day, it came back to life, but different. The brightness pattern had changed. The rhythm was faster, more urgent, and the radio signal that had been a faint whisper was now stronger. More complex layers of information that seemed to be encoded in multiple frequencies. Simultaneously, cryptographers and linguists joined the teams of astronomers and physicists trying to decode what might be a message from another world. They looked for mathematical patterns, prime numbers, pi, anything that might be a universal constant that an intelligent species would use to establish communication, and they found something buried in the signal. There were sequences that matched fundamental mathematical constants, numbers that should be the same anywhere in the universe. This could not be coincidence. This was intention. This was intelligence. Michio Kaku addressed the United Nations explaining that humanity was facing a moment that would define our species. We had evidence strongly suggesting that an object from another star system, an object that appeared to be artificial, was approaching our planet and attempting to communicate. The debate that followed was unlike anything in history. What should humanity do? Should we respond to the signal? Should we attempt communication? Or should we stay silent, fearful of drawing attention to ourselves? The scientists were divided. The politicians were terrified, and the public was both excited and afraid. Some argued that any civilization capable of traveling between the stars would be so far advanced beyond us that we would be like ants to them, insignificant and beneath notice. Others countered that intelligence might seek out other intelligence, that contact could lead to an exchange of knowledge that would transform human civilization. While the debate raged, 3i Atlas made the decision for us. The object performed another maneuver, but this time instead of continuing toward Earth, it began to slow down, matching velocity with our planet, not approaching, not fleeing, just pacing us like it was waiting. This was it. This was the moment. Everything had been building toward. An object from the stars was holding position near Earth, displaying signs of intelligence and control, and humanity had to decide what to do next. The mission that had been planned was hastily modified. Instead of a flyby probe, they would attempt to send a spacecraft that could approach slowly, peacefully, carrying messages and symbols, representing humanity golden records like the ones sent on Voyager, but updated for this unprecedented situation. But before the mission could launch, 3i Atlas did something that no one had predicted. Something that made all the preparation, all the planning suddenly irrelevant. A smaller object separated from 3i Atlas, breaking away from the main body and beginning its own trajectory, a trajectory aimed directly at Earth. Now the panic was real now. The military got involved because whatever was happening, this was no longer just a scientific curiosity. This was potentially a threat. Every defense system on the planet went to high alert as this smaller object descended through space toward our world. Michio Kaku appeared exhausted, pleading for calm, reminding everyone that if this civilization wanted to harm us, they could have done so already, that the fact they had revealed themselves, that they had sent signals, suggested they wanted communication, not conflict. The smaller object entered Earth's atmosphere, but it did not burn up like a meteor. It slowed impossibly, maintaining control as it descended. And then it landed in a remote area, sending coordinates through radio signals, as if inviting us to come and see. Teams were mobilized, military scientists, diplomats, all converging on the landing site. And what they found there, what they saw when they approached the object that had separated from 3i Atlas, has not been fully disclosed to the public. But Michio Kaku in a leaked audio recording said something chilling. He said that what we found changes everything, that the object is clearly a probe, clearly designed by intelligence, but the symbols on it, the materials it is made from, they do not match anything we expected. And here is what keeps me up at night. He continued in that recording. 3i Atlas is still out there, still waiting, and this probe, this messenger, it is not the first one they have sent. We found evidence that they have been watching us for much longer than we ever imagined. The official statements from governments have been carefully neutral, acknowledging the landing, confirming that the object is being studied, refusing to provide details. But the silence, the hesitation, it tells us more than words could. Meanwhile, 3i Atlas remains in position near Earth, a silent sentinel from the stars, and every day more astronomers report new observations that deepen the mystery, strange energy readings unexplained, fluctuations in local spacetime, and most disturbingly brief moments where the object seems to phase partially out of our dimension, as if it exists in more than just our three-dimensional reality. Michio Kaku has gone quiet. his last public appearance, was weeks ago, and when asked directly whether we are in contact with an extraterrestrial intelligence,